I'm gonna fly through this presentation a little bit. It's a presentation I've given a couple times on the future and the past of medicine, because I don't think we can figure out what the future of medicine is without really understanding a little bit about the past and what it is that we know and don't know. And the reality is, I think I said this in the first presentation, we don't know nothing, right? We don't know anything comparatively to what we'll know in 50 years. And 50 years ago, we didn't know anything comparatively to what we knew 50 years before then, and so on and so forth. And it's actually crazy how far medicine has come in just the last 100 years or so. So let's go back in time a little bit, right? Back in early times, 33rd century BC, right? Everything, while medicine dates back to those times, there was no real understanding of what was actually going on, right? If you think about the way that we operated or we administered medicines or really did anything, it was all about sort of expelling evil humors, right? Taking out evil spirits from the body, because that is what, that's what caused all the bad. So people were doing incredible things. I mean, they were drilling holes in the brain, right? Drilling skull holes to relieve pressure. But they always went back to, hey, this is because we're taking rid of evil in the body, right? And evil spirits will invade these unfortunate individuals. If you go back and look at some of the early writings of medicine, this is Iber's Papyrus, it actually covered many diseases, and it started to know the position of some of the vital organs and the fact that there maybe is this thing called circulation in the blood. We just learned a little bit about circulation, right? And the coagulation cascade and everything else. So it's starting in 1600 BC to maybe we understand a little bit more. Hippocrates, the 4th century, right? Father of modern medicine, father of medicine, Hippocrates is often called. But even him, he was looking for natural causes, right? The interesting thing, I think we had somebody in family medicine, right? We were talking about preventative diseases or healthy lifestyle. He was all about sort of healthy lifestyle and preventing disease by lifestyle changes. And then you had this guy, Galen. Galen was a 2nd century physician, probably one of the most famous modern physicians. And he was one of the first to kind of really study and dissect. Now, nobody would think about dissecting a human cadaver at this time, right? That was very, very, very much off the charts. But he started dissecting animals. He postulated many, many theories, right? But it all came down to still that there was this imbalance of vital fluids in the body, and that's what caused issues. He thought about 2 kinds of blood. He didn't realize that there was an arterial and venous circulation that was all connected. He actually thought there were 2 different types of blood in the human body. But the interesting thing about Galileo was that basically not Galileo. Galileo did the stars. Galen was that his sort of basis formed what we thought about medicine for millennia, right? Everybody said, okay, what Galen said was right. That's how we're going to practice medicine. And it wasn't until a guy named Vesalius came along, and he was the first person who actually studied human anatomy in real detail. He was the first person to say, you know what? I don't think that what Galen said was right. I'm going to do my own experimentation. He started actually experimenting. Before this, it was all taken as, well, whatever Galen said was right, right? So then he started actually dissecting and seeing, okay, can I really figure out what's actually going on? And he was one of the first people. He was a modern anatomist, really. And he, you could see the detailed drawings of all the muscles and everything else that he was able to comprehend. But everything still up until this point is all anatomic based. There's really no understanding of physiology, biochemistry, pathophysiology, right? Nothing about a cell. It's like, okay, cool, I can like retract this skin and see the muscle, but I don't know about myosin and actin and all that kind of stuff, right? I'm just seeing muscle. But even this, huge, huge advance, and this was only 1500, so what are we talking about, 500 years ago, right? Think about all of humankind and all of how long humans have been around for. And it's only in the last 500 years that we really even got like a decent understanding of what anatomy was. Again, everything for years and years and years was chalked up to basically divine displeasure, right? You have an issue, well, the gods put it upon you. And that's really what it was. Now, even up until 1800, right? So now we're talking about 200 years ago or so, average life expectancy was just 40 years. Now, what have we done in the last 200 years to understand so much more than we did just 200 years ago and blow away our knowledge base from 5,000 years ago, from 50,000 years ago? I mean, it's crazy how far we've come. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of these modern advances and just, again, I want you to put into perspective just how far we've come, right? Modern surgery, 1840s. Does anybody know what this is a picture of? Yeah. Not King George. This was in America, so we don't like King George in America. Any other ideas? Maybe see what's happening? Do you see the guy in white? Okay, so that guy's the patient, okay? And then there's a bunch of old guys around him who are balding, right? Interestingly, do you see the guy right behind the guy in white? You see he's holding a pot of something? This is a depiction of the first ever utilization of ether as an anesthetic. So before this, if you needed surgery, how'd you get surgery done? You take a shot of rum or a lot of rum, you get held down to the table, and we go hacking, right? That was what was happening. Up until about 150 years ago, that's all that we had. This was, at MGH, the first utilization, this happened at MGH, the first utilization of ether as an anesthetic, and that all of a sudden, it's like, oh wow, we can do potentially painless surgery? I mean, think about how many more things we could do. Think about how much more precise we can be. It is incredible what you can do after this one little discovery. And he was actually a dentist who discovered this. So this was the first administration of a surgery with ether, and there's that little ether canister, right? So back in the day, medical and surgical were very separate, right? So surgery was the realm of barbers. Why? They had the thing, they had the scissors, right? Like, they were the people who owned scissors. It was a barbers who would gain the skill of closing wounds and doing that kind of stuff. So it was very much, they were called barber surgeons, even until Columbia, for instance, has a school of physicians and surgeons. They specifically call it a school of physicians and surgeons because physicians and surgeons back in the day were not together, and then they combined them. So obviously now we don't think of it that way, but really, surgery is a very modern phenomenon. And think about how many things we treat with surgery today. We have hundreds of, thousands of surgeries that you could perform to save somebody's life, make their quality of life better. But it was only in the last 100 years or so that we were able to really do anything. So anesthetic, right? Before this, surgery was only a very last resort, right? You could not, most people opted for death rather than surgery. If you had a mass, if you had cancer, who's going to go chop that out if you didn't have anesthetics? It's impossible. How are you going to operate on the belly without anesthesia? You can't, right? So it was really the introduction of anesthesia 150 years ago. And now, anesthesia is so safe, right? Even about 20 years ago, anesthesia wasn't considered all that safe. There would be many people who wouldn't wake up. Now all of a sudden we've made more advances and now it's super safe. This is a painting of the Agnew Clinic in the 1800s, okay? And in the 1800s, somebody figured out, Semmelweis figured out, that hey, if we start washing our hands before childbirth, babies died less. Now, they didn't know why, right? They didn't understand why, but he said, hey, I figured out if people wash their hands, babies die less during childbirth. But it wasn't until 60 years after that that somebody finally came up with, why might that be? Oh, germ theory, right? So it took years, even after Louis Pasteur and Lister figured out that, hey, there are these little things like bacteria or maybe germs that cause disease, and maybe we shouldn't be operating with our bare hands. Maybe we shouldn't be coughing in people's faces. Maybe we should, wear masks and gloves in the operating room. They introduced this theory, but nobody even believed them. They're like, nah, that doesn't make any sense. We're going to still operate the way we are. It took years and years and years to get buy-in, right? Before this, people just thought, hey, disease came out of thin air, right? It wasn't until Pasteur, again, only 150 years ago or so, that we even started thinking about, oh, maybe there are these things that cause germs. And then, well, how do you treat them? How do you get rid of them? Well, penicillin, introduced about 100 years ago. That was the first antibiotic, and that was by mistake, right? So penicillin was found by mistake in the lab. Fleming was doing some work. He realized that, hey, this petri dish didn't grow anything. Well, it's because I had penicillin on it, right? So I again want you to put into perspective just how much human history you have, and antibiotics only came in 100 years ago. Now, we've probably started overusing antibiotics, and now we have other problems like super drug-resistant bacteria. But 100 years, that's it. That's all we've had. And then organ transplantation. You guys know about, we talked a little bit before about liver transplants as the ultimate cure for cirrhosis, right? 1950s, these two twins were the first guys to have a kidney transplant. This happened at Brigham and Women's Hospital up in Boston. So these guys had a kidney transplant, and basically they were twins. One of the twins was dying. They took one kidney out, attached it to the leg. It was outside the body, staying outside the body, but it produced urine. Like, holy shit, we can produce urine. We can hook up somebody else's kidney to somebody else's body and produce urine, get rid of the toxins, right? Maybe you know what's going on here? Anybody seen that picture? This guy, last year, got a transplant, not of a human heart, of a pig heart. He had a pig heart transplanted in. Now, the pig heart was genetically grown in the pig to be as equivalent as a human heart, and they transplanted a pig's heart into a human. They just did the second one last week. So now there's 2 pig heart human transplants that have happened. Now, we've been using pig valves actually for a long time, believe it or not, in the body. It's called a bovine valve. We use it in the heart as a replacement for aortic or mitral valves. But just last year was the first time that anybody's ever thought about, or I mean, they've obviously think about it for years, but they transplanted a pig heart into a human. Just think about how far that has come in 50 years, right? 50 years ago, we made this huge leap of all of a sudden transplanting organs, and then 50 years after that, we're now growing organs in another person, not even a person, in an animal's body, and using that for a human. That's crazy, right? I mean, that's insane. Little history of some transplants, right? So Joseph Murray and David Hume in Boston. This is Brigham and Women's Hospital. It's literally right next to where I work. So we see the same picture, same thing every day. Super cool that we're able to get this far. And then let's talk about some tools, right? Does anybody know what's going on here? Stethoscope, right? Rene something something French. How did we listen to the heart back in the day? Well, we didn't if you were a woman. Why? Because you had breasts. So a male physician, which by the way, all the physicians 100 years ago were male, or 150 years ago, right? Would not listen, would not auscultate a woman. because of their breast. It would be thought of as grotesque, right? So this guy came up with a way, potentially to stay away and be able to listen to the heart. Super cool, right? First simple stethoscope. Then, that was early 1800s, so this guy came up with a stethoscope. Obviously, there's been many iterations since then. And now, as you guys are going through medical school, I bet you none of you will own a stethoscope. Why? Because it's useless today. Because instead of listening and guessing, I can utilize ultrasound to actually see what's going on. And I don't need a big ass ultrasound machine anymore. I can literally hook one up to my phone. I can have my phone, I can have a transducer, and I can do an echo right then and there. Or maybe I can hook up my AirPods to a stethoscope-like thing and get a huge EKG right there. This is not fantasy, this is reality, right? So even just think about, again, the stethoscope, a huge advance in medicine. But at the end of the day, it's a simple device that lets you hear a little better what's going on the other side. That's nothing compared to what's going to happen and what is happening now, right? Most, even cardiologists don't carry around a stethoscope anymore because they're able to carry around POCUS, point of care ultrasound. They're able to see and echo and not guess what's going on, but actually know what's going on. It's incredible. Anybody know what this is? A picture of? First ever X-ray, right? This is the first ever X-ray that was done. It was, I can't remember, I should know the guy's name, I can't remember it, but it was a guy and his wife. He imaged the wife's hand. That was in 1895, so about 100 years ago. Then 50 years ago or so, we came up with ultrasound, maybe a little longer, 50 years now. 50 years ago, we came up with CT scans, then MRIs, and now, no longer guessing. I can see inside the body to know exactly what's going on, right? Within a matter of milliseconds, I can get a full aortic reconstruction. I can understand exactly what's happening in the circle of Willis. What's the circle of Willis? Anybody know? It's the circulation of the brain. So the circle of Willis makes up the whole circulation of the brain. So that's the brain and all its arteries, right? I can see where the clot is. I can go take out the clot. Again, this is what we're doing today, just 50 years, 20 years after this even came into existence. We're now able to do all this. Think about what's going to happen in the next 20 years. It's going to be crazy. 3D printing, I mean, this is something that, what if we could print a little replacement ACL, right? What if you could, this is a picture of alveoli, what if you could grow a lung somehow and start doing crazy things? Let's think about cancer for a sec. For years, we had no therapy for cancer. And then along came a guy called Halsted, and he said, you know what? I'm going to take out a bunch of cancer. What do you think this is a picture of? A mastectomy. It's called a radical mastectomy, right? This is a female with breast cancer. And the answer was, take out the breast. And not just take out the breast, but take out the pectoral muscle behind it, maybe resect the lung, take out as much as you can, right? Because this is cancer, we gotta get rid of it, we gotta hack at it, we gotta take it out, take it out, take it out, take it out, keep getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And that was the basis of cancer therapy, right? Just take it out. But what do we know about cancer today? So again, what do we know about cancer today that probably this wouldn't work? What were you saying?
It's uncurable.
Well, not necessarily it's uncurable. But how does cancer work? Yeah. It metastasizes, right? Cancer is not a gross problem. It's a microscopic problem, right? So if you see cancer in the breast, if you see a lump here, that doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have cancer all over your body, right? And even when we see cancer on scans, we're seeing hundreds of millions of cells, right? We're not seeing that one cell. But now with PET CT, can you see less? Can you see the activity of that cell and maybe there's a little tiny cancer there. What about molecular imaging in the next 20 years? Maybe we'll see one cancer cell somewhere where right now we have no idea where it is. So for cancer though, it was all take it out, take it out, take it out until this guy came along, Sidney Farber, and he was studying leukemia in kids. Leukemia in kids was a death sentence, right? You got leukemia as a kid, a very common blood-borne cancer, and essentially, unfortunately, you would die, right? And kids all around the world were dying all the time from this. And he thought about studying folic acid. Now, you know, he studied a little bit more and figured out, okay, what if I give folic acid? Will that arrest leukemia in kids? And guess what happened? Any ideas? It killed them faster. So it did exactly the opposite. Should we be mad at Farber? Did he do something wrong? Well, he was killing kids faster. But he was trying. He tried something, right? And guess what? He figured out that, okay, if folic acid killed kids, what if I gave them the opposite of folic acid? What if I gave them something like amneptyrone? And he did that. And guess what? Ooh, some of the kids went into remission. All of a sudden, right? All of a sudden the kids went into remission. Now they all relapsed eventually. And Farber was, a lot of people looked at Farber and said, what are you doing? Why are you treating these kids? They're all dying, right? But amneptyrone was a starting point for a lot of modern medicine, or at least what we practice today, which is chemotherapy. So this was one of the first chemotherapy agents, right? So now we're not just hacking at cancer, now we're treating it through the blood, right? It's really interesting to think about people like this who in some ways were experimenting with human life, right? But made advances in medicine like that. Now, we think about this today, right? Chemotherapy. And you've probably all know somebody at least who had some sort of chemotherapy in their lives or affected by cancer. Super common, unfortunately. We're still using drugs like amneptyrone or methotrexate today. But I can promise you, again, 50 years from now, you're going to look back and be like, wow, we were really stupid. Because what does chemotherapy do? It just attacks the body and kills everything, right? We go, kill as much as we can, and hope that the good stuff survives, right? That's why you lose your hair, right? It's going and attacking things like hair follicles. That's why you get anemic during chemotherapy. That's why you get weak. That's why you're prone to infection, right? You're trying to wipe out as much as you can and then rebuild some good stuff, essentially. But that is such an antiquated, archaic way. It's like going in, it's like if I told you, hey, knock out the one light bulb that's on, and you went in completely blindfolded and started knocking out every single light bulb, right? And you're like, well, I got the one. But you just knocked out the other 99 for absolutely no reason, right? I can promise you guys are going to look back 50 years from now and say, wow, chemotherapy in the way that we did it was really stupid. And guess what? This is how we're doing it for the vast majority of cancers today. We're throwing drugs at them and seeing if they work. But we're taking baby steps, or maybe more than baby steps, towards interesting new things. This was one of the first targeted cures, Gleevec, right? Specific inhibitor for BCR-ABL, all of a sudden turns that off, and now you cure CML. It turns off one tiny protein, and now it's cured. Not kills all the cancer cells in the body, or kills all the cells in the body, turns off one protein. And that's what the future is going to be, right? The future is totally going to be, hey, let's figure out the genomic sequence here. Let's figure out the molecular understanding here. Let's go precision medicine, not let's whack the entire body. And you guys, again, this is just at the cusp, right? We are like, if you think about when we started sequencing the genome 20 years ago, And now how far are we today, right? We didn't have an ability to do that. And now look how far we are. And what's going to happen tomorrow, it's going to be insane. For any of you guys who are interested in cancer, I really recommend this book, Emperor of All Maladies by Siddharth Mukherjee. It's a great book. It's a really good read, and I just throw it on here because it's one of my favorite books. Vaccines, right? Vaccines weren't invented until 200 years ago. Somebody figured out, hey, if I put a small amount of smallpox in people, then they don't actually get smallpox later on. That was the first thing. And now, look, 2 years ago, we were able to get a vaccine to market within a couple of months with mRNA technology. That's potentially going to change everything, right? And even medical students change, right? So I went through this whole thing the first time about how hard it is to get into med school. Guess what? If you guys were born 140 years ago, you could walk in, right? You could walk right into medical school. You'd have no problem. They didn't care. It was about 16 weeks long. I doubt you went into any debt. I think you could just go. But then all of a sudden, we started getting higher standards and more training, which is a good thing in reality. So, you know, I paint some of these pictures, right? I'm giving you a little bit of an understanding of what happened in the past. And now let's talk a little bit about tomorrow, right? I mean, these are just some random things we could think of, right? Instead of going to the doctor and getting an EKG, well, I mean, all of you guys with your Apple Watches, right? It can take your EKG now. What if you could do it forever? What's the next step? I mean, that's a commercially available product for $400, right? Today. Imagine what people are making, what they're thinking of. What if your doctor knew beforehand that you had an arrhythmia? What if we could sense more than just your heart rate? Mixed reality, augmented reality, virtual reality, right? That's going to be a realization of your future in medical school. I doubt you guys are going to dissect animals or humans the way I did in med school. You're going to be able to like literally dissect it right on the spot. Or think about a brain tumor, and the neurosurgeon wants to be able to simulate what they're going to do beforehand, see what nerves or what parts of the brain they might hit. Well, I'm going to take that scan, I'm going to make a 3D model out of it, it's going to be virtual reality, and I'm going to be able to sit there and actually dissect and see what happens. It's going to happen. It's happening today. I actually played with a headset the other day, commercially available for spine surgery. So I do a lot of spine augmentations where I essentially augment the spine by putting cement in there for spinal fractures. And I put the headset on. The patient's CT scan was in front of me, there, transposed on the patient, and I could actually see what I was doing on a real patient. Now, I didn't think it was quite ready for prime time, but this is today. I know in 10 years it's going to be ready, right? Think about how bad your cell phone was 20 years ago. You guys weren't even born 20 years ago. But think about how bad my cell phone was 20 years ago compared to what it is today, right? I mean, the leaps and bounds we're going to make are crazy. Genomic testing, being able to understand not just what's your blood type, that's so basic, right? I want to go really deep into this. And then artificial intelligence, right? I mean, we're literally at the cusp of artificial intelligence. It can write a personal statement now. But think about feeding all the data of all the human cancer trials that have ever been done. Think about having it kind of come up with solutions, right? It's going to be incredible. Right now, we barely have even started touching on it. I'm like, what you guys are seeing right now in large language models is nothing compared to what we're going to see and the applications that are going to eventually happen in medicine. And I put this in, right, because in the grand timeline of human history, right, the last 200 years, tiny blip, and think about all that we just talked about and how far it's come in just that much time. It's really remarkable. But we talk about all these crazy advances. What's the reality on the ground, right? Reality on the ground is nobody in Honduras even has access to medication, right? Even in the United States, we have lack of insurance, lack of access. Mental health is something that in many countries isn't even talked about. All these advances are being made by capitalistic companies. to charge hundreds of thousands of dollars potentially for medications. Is that wrong or right? I leave that up to you, but it is the reality, right? So there's all these things and all these advances that we're making, which are technologically amazing, but at the end of the day, we have to get that access to everybody on the planet, not just a select few. And that's actually probably one of our biggest issues right now, is how do you get the right access to care for the right people? Your care here is going to be very different than your care in Panama or Honduras. Hell, your care here might be very different from one hospital to another hospital based on your insurance coverage. Anyway, so what's next? You know, I leave you guys with thinking about, like, what is next in medicine? How are you going to do it? How will you shape the future of medicine, right, as you guys are jumping into this career? It's an awesome career. How are you going to avoid all the bad and think through all the good? And how are you going to incorporate all this awesome technology into really being able to make an impact in patients? I really, really know, I don't even just think, I know that hopefully you guys are going to look back 20 years from now when you're practicing physicians and say, oh yeah, he was right. Chemotherapy is stupid, right? Or why did we x-ray the entire body? Why did we give radiation that way? Why did we perform mammograms where we radiated women's breasts to find cancer? Why didn't we just do this blood test where we had it, right? Like, there's gonna be so many things that you guys are gonna be a part of in the next 20, 30, 40 years. And so I think it's gonna be awesome, right? I think it's a great journey for you guys to all be on. It's something that will be a ton of fun, and it's something that will be worth it despite all the sleepless nights and everything else. So I hope you guys enjoyed today. Hope it was somewhat informative, insightful. You know, we at MedSchoolCoach, we're here to sort of help you guys through the application process, through the MCAT, through gaining these experiences. So please check us out at MedSchoolCoach.com. We'd love to come back, keep giving these kind of talks, keep helping you guys out. If there's anybody who wants to chat more, if there's any questions, happy to take them now. Yeah.
So, like, I asked earlier about, like, how you think AI would, like, make certain professions like radiology or whatever, like, obsolete. What are your thoughts on that?
So I think there's no doubt that professions will change, right? But it's not that it becomes obsolete, it's that it's augmented, right? So a radiologist is not going to be replaced, a pathologist is not going to be replaced, but they're going to be augmented, meaning that as a radiologist, you might be able to do your job a whole lot better because of artificial intelligence. Because all of a sudden the computer might tell you, hey, look over here, right? I've studied a data set of 100,000 individuals and this thing looks abnormal. Oh, okay, let me look at that and figure out what's abnormal. So I think those kind of things will happen 100% and are happening today, but it is not that you're going to replace that human necessarily. Yeah?
All the advancements that are like going to happen soon in medicine, do you think that it might be important or interesting for us to consider to have some sort of tech background while we're also studying?
That's a great question. So I do think that having some sort of technical background is nice. If I was in your seat right now, I would absolutely take some classes on artificial intelligence. To have an understanding and a knowledge of, like, how this might work would be awesome, because the reality is none of us know exactly how it's going to work, and you don't need to be an expert on it, right? But if you have some basis of it, you can think differently, and you can be somebody who maybe is either leading it or incorporates it in a way that is easier, more beneficial, whatever it might be. So I actually think, yes, I would try to get exposure to some technology, right? To something that you feel like is going to be a future in medicine, whether it's genomics, artificial intelligence, or any of those kind of things. I think there's no doubt that it will make an impact and allow you to be a better physician. At the end of the day, we heard it from Dr. Haddock, right? The bullshit we have you memorize right now of the Krebs cycle and the coagulation cascade and all that is not really helpful in modern medicine necessarily, right? Now, of course, the coagulation cascade has its place, but I couldn't tell you a single damn thing. I don't remember a single thing of it, right? I don't remember the first part of the Krebs cycle. I told you I don't remember the periodic table, right? But as in practice, I know how to take care of my patients. You're going to learn how to do that through your years of training in medicine, and having some sort of background in the things that are going to be impactful, not the things that were impactful, I think is really helpful. Yeah.
How do you keep your humor and personality in check, low stress levels when you're dealing with so much stress and the pressure of medicine?
That's a good question. I think that's a personality based, right? There are certainly people who I work with who maybe don't keep their cool, but I think it's also a knowledge based thing where if you feel like you're in control, you are in control, right? And I've had patients die on the table, right? We have traumatic situations. We have situations where patients are unstable at all times. And the reality is, if you start to panic in those situations, that's when it gets downhill. But if you sort of like take a step back and say, hey, we're gonna do this in the systematic way, then you can keep control. And then you can add humor when you want to. Anything that we've talked about today or anything else, MedSchoolCoach.com. We've been doing this for 15, now almost 20 years. Really good track record of getting people in and through medical school. But hopefully today was helpful. Hopefully it was fun. And I look forward to seeing you guys back maybe in a little bit. Thanks, everybody.